What if the discomfort you've been carrying lately isn't just stress, not exhaustion from a rough week, not a mood that'll pass, something quieter than that, a low, persistent hum beneath the surface that you can't quite name and can't quite shake? Most people learn to live around it. They stay busy, they make plans, they tell themselves it'll settle when life settles. But here's what nobody really talks about. Sometimes that feeling doesn't settle. It gets louder. And the longer it goes unacknowledged, the more of your life it quietly starts to color. There's a perspective worth considering today, that the soul doesn't suffer in silence. It sends signals, small ones at first, ones that are easy to explain away. But when you see them together, they form a pattern that's hard to ignore. We're going through 7 of those signals. Some will feel familiar right away. Others might stop you mid-thought. And the last one, I'll say this now, tends to hit people the hardest, because it's the one that sounds the most like something you've felt, but never had words for. We'll come back to that. But first, a question worth sitting with through everything that follows. How long have you been aware that something's off? And how long have you been waiting for it to sort itself out on its own? Before we start, one thing needs to be said directly. If any of these signs feel close to home, that's not a bad thing. It doesn't mean you're broken or falling apart. It might mean that some part of you has been trying to get your attention for a while, and you're finally slowing down enough to listen. That matters. That's actually where things begin to change. Sign number 1. You feel emotionally numb, without a clear reason. You know that feeling when something should move you, and it just doesn't? A song that used to hit differently. A moment with someone you love that should feel warm, but lands flat. A celebration that looks right from the outside, but feels hollow when you're standing in the middle of it. This isn't ordinary tiredness. It's a specific kind of disconnection, like there's glass between you and your own life, and you can see everything clearly, but can't quite feel it. Across many spiritual traditions, feeling is understood as the soul's primary language. When that goes quiet, when joy feels muted, and even sadness becomes unreachable, it tends to signal that something deeper has been suppressed. Usually, through years of overwork, people-pleasing, or simply surviving circumstances that demanded everything and left nothing for yourself. It shows up most often in people who have been living for everyone else so consistently that they've forgotten what it feels like to live for themselves. If that sounds familiar, you're not alone. But the next sign catches people off guard because it doesn't announce itself as a warning. It just feels like life getting quieter. Sign number 2, you've lost interest in things that once gave you purpose. Think of something you used to genuinely love, not something you do out of habit, something that once felt like an expression of who you actually are. Now, ask yourself honestly, when did you last do it? And when you think about it now, does it bring any excitement or just a vague kind of tiredness? This goes beyond burnout. Burnout is about capacity. What we're describing is something closer to a withdrawal, as though the energy that used to flow toward the things that mattered to you has simply dried up. There's a view held across different traditions that the soul won't sustain what it's outgrown. When a life no longer reflects something true about the person living it, the inner world starts pulling back quietly, gradually, in ways that are almost impossible to notice from the inside until you step back and look. Most people only recognize it in retrospect. They realize they can't remember the last time they felt genuinely lit up by anything. That's not a small thing to notice. And what comes next tends to explain why. Sign number 3, you feel increasingly invisible, even around people who know you. Here's something specific, see if it resonates. You're in a room full of people who care about you, and something in you still feels completely unseen. Not lonely, in the usual sense, something more unsettling than that. A sense that the version of you present in that room isn't quite real. That you've been performing a version of yourself for so long that you've genuinely lost track of where the performance ends. This feeling has a particular texture. It's not dramatic. It's more like a quiet grief for the parts of yourself you set aside to fit in, to keep the peace, to be what the situation needed. Many traditions interpret this as the soul pulling away from what might be called a false identity. The masks we wear don't just hide who we are from others over time, they start to hide us from ourselves. When the gap between who you truly are and who you're presenting yourself to be becomes wide enough, something inside starts to resist. This tends to surface during long stretches in the wrong relationship, the wrong career, or the wrong version of a life built to satisfy everyone but you. And here's what's worth knowing. Feeling invisible is often the first sign that something real is trying to come back. Sign number 4. You're haunted by a persistent sense that you're off track. You can't necessarily point to what's wrong. Nothing catastrophic has happened. But there's something, a quiet pull, a low-grade resistance that keeps surfacing no matter how much you try to push past it. It might feel like standing at a crossroads and knowing, without being able to explain it, that the direction you've been walking isn't quite the right one. People who've made significant changes to their lives, career shifts, relationship endings, whole life pivots, often describe this feeling as the thing that came first. Long before any outer change happened, there was this persistent inner discomfort that wouldn't fully go away, not loud enough to force action, just present enough to make peace impossible. Some call it intuition, others describe it as a kind of inner knowing that doesn't need evidence to be felt. Whatever language you use, the pattern is consistent. The discomfort isn't the problem. The discomfort is carrying information. And the longer it goes unacknowledged, the louder it tends to get, which brings us directly to where it often goes next. Sign number 5. Your sleep has become restless, and your dreams feel unusually heavy. You wake up at 2 in the morning with a heaviness you can't place. Or you remember fragments of dreams that feel more urgent than anything in your waking day, emotionally charged, strange, impossible to fully shake by the time afternoon comes. This one matters because it happens outside your conscious control. Across many cultures and across centuries, dreams have been understood as a space where the deeper mind, the part that operates beneath reason and habit, processes what the waking mind is refusing to look at. When there's unresolved weight underneath the surface, it tends to surface here, in the one place you can't manage or redirect it. Consistent disruption of sleep during emotionally significant periods of life isn't random. It tends to point towards something being carried, grief, fear, a truth that hasn't been acknowledged yet, that simply has nowhere else to go while you're awake. If your nights have felt heavier lately, it might be worth asking not just what you're dreaming about, but what you've been consistently avoiding thinking about during the day. The next sign is the one that hits closest to home for most people because it involves the people around you. And there's no easy way to explain it without sounding like something's wrong. Sign number 6. The people and situations around you no longer feel like they fit. Nothing has changed on paper, but conversations that used to feel comfortable now feel draining. Friendships that once came easily now require an effort you're not sure you have. Even familiar places tied to good memories sometimes feel like you're visiting someone else's life rather than your own. This is genuinely disorienting because you can't point to a reason. Nothing went wrong. Nobody did anything. And yet, something has quietly shifted. There's a perspective worth considering here, that growth, even when it's entirely unconscious, changes the shape of a person. And when that shape changes, things that once fit start to feel slightly wrong, not because those people or places are bad, but because you've moved. Even if you didn't notice the movement, this friction tends to appear right before people make significant changes. It's not a sign that everything around you needs to be discarded. It's more like pressure, the kind of pressure that, historically, tends to precede something opening up. What comes next is the sign that tends to stay with people longest, the one that's hardest to describe, but immediately recognizable once someone names it. Sign number 7. You feel a deep, wordless longing for something you can't identify. This is the hardest one to explain, and the most important. It's not loneliness, though. It carries some of that weight. It's not grief, exactly, though it moves through you similarly. It's a longing, persistent, directionless, reaching toward something just beyond the edge of what you can see or name. Some people describe it as homesickness for a place they've never actually been. Others say it's like a hunger that nothing in their current life satisfies, not achievement, not distraction, not even the presence of people they genuinely love. Something in them keeps reaching for something else, and they don't know what it is or where to look. This is the experience that spiritual traditions across vastly different cultures have returned to, again and again, not as a symptom of something broken, but as a signal of something vast. The idea that this particular ache is the soul recognizing its own depth, recognizing that there's more meaning, more truth, more of do still waiting to be found. What looks like emptiness from the inside might actually be orientation. The soul pointing in a direction it hasn't been allowed to move toward yet. If you've felt this, if you've carried this quiet, unnamed weight without knowing where it was pointing it, may be the most honest thing you've felt in a long time. Look back at how many of those felt familiar. What's striking, when you see them together, is how quiet they all are. None of them announce themselves as crises. They're more like signals sent on a low frequency, easy to miss when life is loud enough. Impossible to fully ignore once you've slowed down enough to hear them. We started today with a question: how long have you been aware that something's off? And how long have you been waiting for it to sort itself out? Seeing these 7 signs together starts to answer that question, not by pointing to something wrong with you, but by pointing to a direction, a life that has gradually, almost invisibly, drifted away from something it needed, away from real feeling, from real purpose, from the version of yourself that existed before all the surviving, and the performing, and the pushing through. People who've come through significant transformations almost always describe a period that looked like this: the numbness, the disconnection, the restless nights, the sense of not quite fitting, the longing without a name. Those weren't signs of an ending. They were the beginning of something that couldn't yet be seen. Here's what I want to leave you with. The soul doesn't create discomfort out of cruelty. It doesn't make you feel restless or hollow or out of place to punish you. If several of these signs landed close to home, it likely means something in you is done waiting, done drifting, done living at the surface of a life that was built for someone slightly different from who you actually are. You don't need to know what comes next. You don't need to have a plan today. What matters is that you're paying attention now in a way you maybe weren't before you pressed play. The question we started with had a harder edge. How long have you been waiting for it to sort itself out? But maybe the truer version of that question is simpler than that. What becomes possible now that you're finally listening? The biggest changes in a person's life rarely begin with a dramatic decision. They begin with a quiet moment of recognition, a moment of finally letting something be seen. This might be that moment. If this reached something in you, share it with someone who's been carrying a feeling they haven't found words for yet.